Welcome back to Major Antonio's presentation of The Yankee Mining Squadron by Reginald Belknap. Chapter 21, Home.
Until departure from Scotland, the squadron had been almost free from the influenza epidemic prevailing elsewhere so seriously. But during the 10-day stay at Portland, some cases appeared among men returning from leave. Among 427 persons on board the San Francisco, there were 113 cases before the disease was finally checked. Enough officers and leading men escaped, however, to warrant sailing for home with only 1 day's delay, but leaving 40 men in Portland Hospital. A few mild cases developed on board the other ships, fortunately with no serious outcome. On Saturday, 14th of December, the Shawmut and Aroostook sailed for the Azores, en route for Bermuda and Hampton Roads, their limited fuel radius making these stops necessary. The rest of the squadron followed on Tuesday, 17th of December, taking the direct route. The rule of no homeward-bound penance for less than 2 years' absence being relaxed on account of exceptional conditions, all ships on leaving Portland flew long streamers. One so long and large from the Roanoke, a steam winch was needed to hoist it. Immediately encountering bad weather, for 3 days less than half the desired progress was made, and the San Francisco had a serious breakdown of her steering gear. Several men were injured while steering by hand, which had to be discontinued because the sea drove so heavily on the rudder. The ship was then steered by the screws alone for 4 days until temporary repairs could be made. Upon the weather clearing, it was decided to divide the squadron, allowing Roanoke, Canandaigua, Housatonic, and Quinnebog to continue the direct run, which their remaining coal and daily consumption warranted doing, while the San Francisco, Canonicus, and Saranac, with shorter fuel supply and larger consumption, proceeded by the Azores. Like other forces coming home, we wished to come into New York for a touch of the limelight after being so long in obscurity, and because the location was central for letting the men go home. With mines on board, we could not expect a welcome anywhere, and at New York, bare permission was doubtful, especially so soon after the Perth Amboy explosions. With no prospect of being invited there, we sailed with destination announced as New York as the one possible chance of getting there, but orders soon came to steer for Hampton Roads instead. Near mid-passage on Christmas night, after dinner, a British collier collided with the Roanoke, opening a good-sized hole in her port side forward. Supports of the bridge being knocked away, its ends sloped down, making it seem at first that the ship was rapidly settling. Steam from a broken pipe came forth in volumes, to which the red glow of the port sidelight lent the appearance of smoke and flames. Collision and fire, with 500 mines on board, far at sea in cold, misty weather, would have been indeed serious. It needed just that to round out our experiences, but fortune was with us, and the situation was promptly brought under control. The Quinnebog saw the collier safe into Halifax, and then overtook the other 3, all 4 mine layers arriving at Hampton Roads without further incident on the 30th of December. The Shawmut and Aroostook had already come in on the 27th. The rest, pursued by bad weather 10 days out of 16, both Christmas and New Year spent at sea, and feeling our way into port through fog, the San Francisco and the 2 with her arrived early January 3rd, 1919, making the squadron once more complete, except for the Baltimore, still absent on experimenting duty. In due course, the last mine was safely discharged from our ships, making a clear record of over 60,000 mines handled without mishap. And yet we were not to disperse without one more experience, a serious fire. The very night after the Saranac had landed her mines, a fire broke out in the wardroom, spreading so rapidly that until outside help came, it seemed impossible to prevent her being completely gutted. Only great exertion saved her, and the incident showed that our strict guard against fire had been no idle precaution.
Chapter 22, The Minesweepers.
With the removal of the mines in peace, the sweepers came into prominence, which gives occasion to mention an inconspicuous part of the mine force work, too easily overlooked. There were 4 large seagoing tugs in the mine squadron: Patuxent, Lieutenant J.B. Hupp; Patapsco, Lieutenant W.E. Benson; Sonoma, Lieutenant J.S. Thayer; and Ontario, Lieutenant E.J. Delavey. These, as fleet tenders had towed targets, carried passengers, mail, stores, and the like. All this continued after they were assigned to the original mine force. Yet, by a more systematic apportionment of their former duties, time was gained for training in mining and sweeping, enough to arouse a keen interest and foster the mine force spirit. In the fleet's tactical and strategical exercises, the tugs took part, and upon our entering the war, the anti-submarine net tasks and the experimenting that were assigned to the mine force were possible of accomplishment only by the use of these tugs, together with our mine carrier vessel, the Lebanon, Lieutenant H.N. Huxford. In seaworthiness, power, and equipment, these vessels had what was needed, but their chief value lay in the resourcefulness and energy of their personnel. Lieutenant E.S.R. Brandt, USN, was their division leader, commanding the Sonoma during their first 18 months in the mine force. Night and day, they were always ready, and it seemed as if their power and seaworthiness would take them anywhere. Well equipped for salvaging, they played an important part in saving the USS Olympia and afterwards the Texas when they grounded in 1917. Often they had long hours of hard duty, but could always be counted on. Service in them gave excellent experience for both officers and men, and many were the capable petty officers turned out. The question, "Can you do it?" was never asked, nor, "Are you ready?" It was necessary only to say, "Go and do," and whether foggy or clear, the tug that was sent would nose her way through somehow. These tugs were not properly equipped for mine sweeping, lacking the special type of winch needed for that purpose. But their 18 months' experience with improvised arrangements yielded information of great value for the new design of a combined seagoing tug and minesweeper type of the Bird class, contracted for during the summer of 1917. By the original plan for the Northern Mine Barrage, the first 12 to be completed of these new sweeping vessels were assigned to the Mine Squadron, and continued efforts were made to expedite their completion, but without success so far as concerned their joining the Mine Squadron. Meantime, in the experiments and tests of the mine, in training the new personnel, and in every kind of transportation and other assistance to the new mine layers during the month preparatory to sailing, the 4 original tugs were invaluable. The new sweepers not being ready, the original 4 were fitted out to take part in the work abroad. When the Mine Squadron left Hampton Roads late in April 1918, the Patuxent and Patapsco were temporarily detached to proceed by way of Bermuda, the Azores, and Brest, escorting a convoy of submarine chasers across. Rear Admiral Wilson, USN, commended them for being the first to deliver such a convoy intact. They finally arrived at Inverness 24th of June 1918, where they were used to inspect and observe minefields, to communicate between the detachments of mine layers at the 2 bases, and to train men. The larger pair, Sonoma and Ontario, were retained with the mine layers until their final sailing for abroad. The Sonoma, Lieutenant J.S. Traer, accompanied the squadron on its trip across, making a notable passage for a vessel of her size. Always ready for any duty, up to station, and able to steam at maximum speed at the end of a 3,000-mile run, she earned commendation for her captain and her engineer officer, Lieutenant L.W. Knight, USN. With the Ontario, which accompanied a convoy of submarine chasers across, the Sonoma, after a brief stay in Scotland, went to Queenstown, where the need for that type was greater than with the mine force. In this assignment, their rescue of submarine victims was a continuation in greater degree of similar pre-war assistance, in home and Cuban ports, off Hatteras and Cape Mazey, rendered to vessels in distress from collision, breakdown, and fire at sea.
Chapter 23, The Mine Force, Old and New.
Details of preparation have been only briefly touched upon in the preceding chapters, though actually their influence on the success of the operation deserves more prominence. It will not be supposed that the new squadron just grew, or that in the active operations everything just broke fair. On the contrary, success was earned by logical, consistent preparation, extending back over years, and by sound organization and execution when the plan was launched. Hard work, development of doctrine, and prospective study between 1914 and 1917 bore fruit, and, for the Navy's credit, the foresight which produced it deserves record, along with the achievement itself. While suitable and adequate material would ever be the first essential in such an operation, the all-important question lay in the personnel afloat. The excellent qualities of the new mine would be of no avail without proper laying of the barrage. Fortunately, we already had a mine-laying force, small but capable, so that we did not look abroad for instruction. Prior to 1914, mine-laying from a ship underway had received little attention in our Navy, but when some early events of the Great European War showed what a part mines were likely to play in the future, mining affairs were made the principal duty of Captain G.R. Marvel in the Navy Department. The conversion of 2 more mine layers was pushed to completion, and mine training was taken up in earnest in the fleet. The hitherto solitary mine ship San Francisco was taken out of the heterogeneous group known as the Auxiliary Division of our fleet to become the flagship of a separate organization for mining and mine sweeping, which was established on July 10, 1915, while Admiral F. Fletcher had the Atlantic Fleet. In the development of this new branch, which was under my command until September 1917, one truth came out forcibly, that the sustained attention requisite throughout mining operations could only be ensured by keeping everything up in man-of-war style. Laying and recovering mines was messy work, and in a ship of a type long obsolete, classed as auxiliary, and using a weapon of stealth barely tolerated, to maintain such a standard was not easy. As Sir Eric Geddes, First Lord of the British Admiralty, said in a speech in New York, before the war, mine-laying was considered unpleasant work for a naval man, an occupation like that of rat-catching, and not attractive. Whatever aversion may have been felt quickly vanished in the growing interest that had been aroused. Besides its own specialty, the new branch joined the fleet's tactical, gunnery, and strategic exercises, these last leading to new activities and to study of the possibilities of mines and of the logical functions of the mine force. Both Admiral Fletcher and his successor, Admiral H.T. Mayo, did all in their power to establish the new element firmly as a regular part of the mobile fleet. Their interest and encouragement had immediate effect in confirming the personnel's sense of value, which had been engendered by the variety of their employment, the stimulating results of their efforts, and belief in the power of their weapon. Experimenting with submarine nets was also taken up, and in our first 6 months of war, the mine force was employed chiefly in planting 3 nets in Chesapeake Bay and 1 each in Long Island Sound and at Newport Entrance. Success with the Long Island net, over 5 miles long, was only achieved after a hard struggle with a 5-knot current, which time after time swept the net away or, crushing its buoys, pulled it under and entwined it with tons of kelp. Such in outline was the scope of mine force activities during the 28 months prior to preparing for the North Sea expedition. We had not yet laid any minefields during the war, but as if in practice for the very operation to come, the force, early in December 1916, had laid a minefield off the Jersey coast below Sandy Hook, 200 loaded mines in 3 parallel lines laid simultaneously, and all taken up by next day, the press not notified. Various arrangements in connection with the handling and transportation of mines had been planned and actually practiced. For result, when the Northern Barrage project came under consideration, the question of practicability of the operation could be answered yes with confidence, and the subsequent working out of mining installations, organization, and training was guided by reliable data, all from our own experience. Many-sided experience had produced a well-knit organization of units that were resourceful, self-reliant, and mutually helpful, well-trained on sound lines in mine-laying, singly and together. Long hours and work in all weathers were a matter of course. Quiet self-confidence was the mark of the force spirit. And thus, although the original mine force was much too small for the great task ahead, its value as a nucleus and leaven for the greatly enlarged mine squadron to be formed could hardly be overstated. Since the autumn of 1916, the principal mine force officers had been myself, as force commander, Commander H.V. Butler, commanding the flagship San Francisco and senior aide, Commander A.W. Marshall, USS Baltimore, and Commander T.L. Johnson, USS Dubuque. All these were to take part in the North Sea operation and were concerned in its preparation. Myself in charge, Butler training the new crews, Marshall experimenting with the new mine, which Butler concluded, and Johnson helping to select the new ships, then going abroad for information. Their experience and their ships were invaluable both in preparation and afterwards. On the principle that, let material be old or new, discipline may be the best. The style of these seasoned men of war, aiming to match the highest naval standard, was always a strong influence in the squadron. In October 1917, with the original order to go ahead, which was accompanied by a word of strong approval from the President down, the development of plans and coordination of all preparations became my principal duty in the Office of Naval Operations. Command of a mine layer, and 2 years at the head of mining affairs in the Atlantic Fleet, had given me experience that was directly pertinent. The intention being to lay the barrage as soon as possible, and counting 5 days as the least time between mine-laying operations, coaling, embarking mines, out, laying, and back. The expected manufacturing output of 1,000 mines a day demanded a mine-laying squadron with capacity of 5,000 mines at one time. Towards this, our San Francisco and Baltimore carried together only 350 mines. The 8 new vessels would add 5,350, thus providing a good margin, either for the loss of a ship or for speeding up. No time was to be lost. The demand for ships, shipyard work, and ship equipment for other purposes was increasing every day. Within 10 days, the Eastern Steamship Corporation's fast passenger liners Massachusetts and Bunker Hill, running daily between New York and Boston, were purchased outright, becoming the Shawmut and Aroostook. Within a month, the Southern Pacific freight steamers El Rio, El Dia, El Cid, and El Siglo were taken over, becoming Roanoke, Housatonic, Canonicus, and Canandaigua, respectively. Carrying 860 mines each, they soon became known as the Big Four. The Old Dominion steamers Hamilton and Jefferson, familiar to passengers between New York and Norfolk, followed by December 6, 1917. The task of making 4 freight ships habitable for crews of 400 men, at the same time carrying twice as many mines as any other vessel of their size, is not done by a wave of the hand, and as for the 4 passenger steamers taken, they were gutted like fish, saloons and cabins ripped out, before their conversion could begin. Although plans had to be based upon what could be done within a reasonable time, with material and labor scarce, all features had to conform to the requirements of the mining installations. These were almost entirely new on the scale contemplated, either in our own or any other service. There was little data available of similar installations, except some British mining memoranda and a few belated blueprints. Lieutenant de Salis, RN, kindly placed his experience at our disposal, which was a help, but attempts abroad had not made a success of mine elevators, which would form a cardinal feature of our installation, nor had others gone in for mine-carrying capacity to the extent we contemplated, which was the maximum number consistent with not squeezing the crew intolerably. Hence, little of their information proved applicable to our case. Experience in our own mine layers, however, San Francisco, Baltimore, and Dubuque during the past 3 years, enabled many details to be decided with a confidence that subsequent results confirmed. That winter of 1917-18 will be long remembered. Material was scarce, transportation congested, labor unsettled, fuel short, weather severe, haste and high prices everywhere. Much delay came from lack of interest among workmen. The campaign of addresses by good speakers explaining the need for the ships and the men's own interest in doing their best did not begin until sometime in February, and then only in a small way. There was insufficient supervision. The contractors were converting vessels to a type for which no model existed, and plans were not forthcoming as fast as wanted, often not in the logical order. Besides delays and losses of material in transportation, one trade in which labor was shortest, shipfitter, was the one on whose work much of the other had to wait. By constant urging and anticipating probable delays, the work as a whole was kept always progressing, even if at times slowly. The captains-to-be and their principal officers came to the ships soon after their taking over, and by January 25, 1918, 2 of the largest ships, Roanoke and Housatonic, were enough advanced to be commissioned. Living conditions were extremely rough amid the dirt and disorder, made worse by the slush and mud in the unpaved shipyards. But the presence of officers and men on board exerted constant forward pressure, while they were becoming acquainted with their ships. In the conversion of the Shawmut and Aroostook at Boston Navy Yard, the ship's companies worked in industrial gangs alongside the civilian employees, with such actual accomplishment and setting such an example as to advance the date of completion materially. At the same time, their training progressed so well that on June 16, 1918, only 1 week after completion, they started across. Every 10 days or so, during the 5 months shipyard work, I would go from Washington for a conference with the captains and the Navy Yard officers at New York and Boston to keep in touch with the actual progress and the matters that appeared to need special attention. These conferences eliminated infinite writing and enabled closer touch to be kept with all preparations, additional effort to be more appropriately applied, than were possible by regular procedure alone, especially amid the swollen volume of correspondence in general. They developed, too, a good understanding among the officers, which made for future harmony and gained time towards the squadron's readiness. Before the new ships were delivered, a special camp at Newport had been provided for training their crews under mine force officers. The San Francisco and Baltimore gave some practical instruction on board, and the camp was supplemented elsewhere so that few, if any, wholly untrained men went to any ship. 3 gun crews were trained in the battleships for each mine layer, and the engineer personnel were kept under training at Philadelphia until wanted. For the officers, similar measures were taken to put them in touch with the methods and experience of the mine force, as far as this could be done with ships most of the time at shipyards, fitting out. Unlike the old mine force, the new was to consist of organizations on shore as well as afloat, and for this, an officer of flag rank was wanted. Rear Admiral Joseph Strauss, USN, was selected as the new commander of the mine force. Long identified with ordnance matters and of distinguished experience at the Naval Ordnance Proving Ground and Smokeless Powder Factory, he was chief of the Bureau of Ordnance for some years before going to command the U.S. battleship Nevada, which he quitted to take command of the mine operation. On February 15, 1918, he came to temporary duty in the Office of Naval Operations, where he familiarized himself with all information bearing on the operation and its preparation, and after a tour of inspection to the ships and acquainting himself with the mine situation, he sailed for England with his aide, Lieutenant Noel Davis, USN. On March 29, 1918, he assumed command of the mine force, with headquarters at U.S. Naval Base 18, Inverness, Scotland. Thereupon, the original mine force, consisting only of ships, became Mine Squadron 1, and it became my part to complete its preparations in the United States and command the active force afloat. The new Mine Squadron 1 was organized on Wednesday, April 10, 1918, at Hampton Roads, Virginia, on board the squadron flagship San Francisco. I relieved Captain H. Feith Butler, USN, who had been in command of the mine force in the interval. He remained as captain of the flagship and was also my chief of staff, the same association that we had in the old mine force. Commander Bruce L. Kaniga, USN, who had been my invaluable assistant in Washington since the preparations began in November, came as my senior aide. To us who had struggled through the long winter's difficulties, it was a memorable event when the first new mine layer, the Roanoke, Captain Stearns, joined the flag on Friday, 12th April, 1918. She was followed closely by the Housatonic, Commander Greenslade, and by the Canandaigua, Commander Reynolds, next day. All was arranged for their loading with mines, and they began at once. By a week later, the Quinnebog, Commander Mannix, and Canonicus, Commander Johnson, had joined, completing the number ready for service at that time. Almost immediately, the Roanoke was sent across ahead of the others, an inspection only 16 days after leaving the shipyard showing that her excellent condition warranted it. She was to help the Baltimore, already there, to finish laying the minefield in the North Irish Channel, described in a previous chapter. But though she arrived in good season and ready, through a change of plan, the Roanoke was not employed there, proceeding instead to Invergordon. The other 4, with the San Francisco, continued the training program. An engine accident in the Housatonic needing 10 days at Norfolk Navy Yard to repair it delayed us a week, which was profitable for tying up the many loose ends left by the shipyards. Our second great event came on Sunday, 28th of April, 1918, when the new squadron got underway together for the first time to exercise tactics and signals while en route from the Chesapeake for Provincetown. The day began and ended with steering gear troubles and was followed by 40 hours of fog, which deprived us of valuable time that had been counted on. Tuesday at 5 p.m., the San Francisco and Housatonic arrived at Provincetown. The Canandaigua was already maneuvering on the measured mile course while her diver was searching for a lost anchor. Canonicus was anchored inside. Quinnebog reported herself anchored in the fog off Nantucket Lightship, repairing an engine brake. Next day, the morning fog lifted enough for all to begin standardizing over the measured course, afterwards proceeding to Gloucester Harbor, Massachusetts, where the final mine proving and the first practice mine laying by the new ships would be done. Strenuous days these, especially for captains. Housatonic asked permission to lag behind a while, arriving at Gloucester very late. "Sorry to drag you over at this unchristian hour, Greenslade, but I wanted to see you about tomorrow's work." "Oh, never mind, sir. This is the life." Quinnebog joined next afternoon, but she still needed some engine repairs which required Navy Yard assistance, and was accordingly ordered at once to Boston. More than unwelcome there with mines on board, the work and her departure were heartily speeded. After scarcely any let-up since the ships had left the shipyards 4 weeks previously, a Sunday, May 5, 1918, was devoted to a well-earned rest, and now had to be decided whether to continue training longer or not. Outside of the ships singly, little had been done. They had not even been all together since the first evening at sea. Yet the mine bases were in such need of the 500 men that we were to bring them that, although only a meager part of the training had been carried out, it was decided to push on. There would be tactics and gunnery exercise en route, and possibly other training that had been omitted might be made up then too. And so the original period of time, estimated as necessary to prepare, was adhered to, namely, in 45 days after leaving the shipyards to be at the North Sea base with coal and mines on board, ready for a mine-laying operation. Despite the numerous delays and mishaps, our arrival in Scotland, May 26, 1918, was on the 40th day from the 5th ship leaving the yard, and all ships were ready for duty. The squadron is now reorganizing. Some of you may go to other duty, some may go out into civil life, where you will work during the conditions of peace which you helped to bring about. And now, let me remind you of the principles on which we won success in our part in this war, and on which we always did our work. Remember this, that the everyday things are the easiest to forget, and it is because we have carefully kept before us the importance of doing the everyday things right that we have earned success. We have not been afraid of work. We have never shied at any job. Every man has felt his part as important to do properly as any other man's part, and as long as the work was to be done, he has kept up his attention. That has been the main principle, not to slack down, that a job is not finished until it is done, and it is not done until it is done right. We have not sought the easiest way, but the right way, and we have generally found that the right way was the easiest way in the long run. And further, that a job, to be rightly done, must be as good at the end and in the middle as in the beginning. We have not slackened. The 860th mine of the Canonicus, of the longest string ever laid, was as good as the first or the 300th or any other mine. I congratulate you all on the work you have done. It will be a very satisfactory and proud memory for you and for all those connected with it. But I congratulate you most on the preparation that it gives you to do still more, to be better men, to be better citizens. Nothing more valuable could come from our work than that. You can fancy what my associations are with these two ships. I made my first cruise as a commissioned officer in the Baltimore, and the past 4 years in her and the San Francisco have been the most interesting I ever had. I am very sorry to leave you of the San Francisco, even for a short time, but I could not leave under happier conditions. To leave at a time of a success like this happens only once in a lifetime. Good luck to all of you." Unquote. Long before the barrage was finished, we were studying how to sweep it up, and soon after the signing of the armistice, experiment began towards safeguarding the sweeping vessels. Before leaving for home, the squadron transferred over 400 men to the bases for the sweeping duty, and subsequently a number of new sweepers were sent over from the United States in groups commanded by officers formerly of the Mine Squadron. The British authorities took steps immediately to mark out the barrage area with light vessels and gas buoys, and actual sweeping began as early as December 1918. It will take months to complete, but well inside a year from its laying, the Northern Barrage will have become a thing of the past. It served its purpose, and more besides. Through the part played in former wars, submarine mines grew in recognition, though slowly, as important means of defense. In this war, they came into extensive employment in offense, the largest as well as most striking offensive use being the Northern Barrage, which, in popular phrase, put mines on the map.
This concludes the Yankee Mining Squadron by Reginald Belknap. We hope you've enjoyed this volume. For more military history audiobooks, subscribe to Major Intonio's channel. Thank you for listening, and so long.